Today I am going to take up a lesson from NCERT's English textbook for class 12. The name of the book is Flamingo, chapter 3, and the title is Deep Water. So we shall look at an autobiographical account from the childhood of an American author, William O. Douglas. Mr. Douglas was an accomplished jurist when he wrote the excerpt that we are going to discuss today. Perhaps the author is asking us to acknowledge the acts of bravery and courage in everyday life that we sometimes tend to overlook and forget. Let's find out. The excerpt in your textbooks has been taken from the book of Men and Mountains that was published in 1950. In this piece, the author reveals how, as a young boy, he nearly drowned in a swimming pool. He talks about his fear of water and how he finally overcame it. William Douglas was born in Maine, Minnesota, after graduating with a Bachelor's of Arts in English and Economics. He spent 2 years teaching high school in Yakima. However, he got tired of this and decided to pursue a legal career. He met the President of the United States, Franklin D. Roosevelt, at Yale and later became an advisor and friend to him. Douglas was a leading advocate of individual rights. He retired in 1975 with a term lasting 36 years and remains the longest serving justice in the history of the American courts. Now we are going to discuss the text. While you read the text, notice these words and expressions in the text. Please open your books. Page number is 23. Okay. While we are going through the text, try to infer the meaning of the words from the context. The words are treacherous, misadventure, out of my wits, subdued my pride, bobbed to the surface like a cock, flailed at the surface, curtain of life fell, fishing for landlocked salmon, back and forth across the pool. These are some of the words which I have identified for you to find the meanings in the text from the context when we are discussing the text. Let's begin with the lesson now. The incident happened when the author was 10 or 11 years old. He had decided to learn to swim. There was a pool at the YMCA in Yakima that offered exactly the opportunity. The Yakima River was treacherous though. Let's understand about Yakima River. The Yakima River is a tributary of the Columbia River in eastern Washington, USA. The state is named after the indigenous Yakama people to whom the land originally belonged. Now, young Douglas' mother had always warned him against him. She never wanted him to go into the river because the river was treacherous. Treacherous, have you got the meaning? That means it was dangerous. When would it change its course? Nobody can tell. So therefore, Douglas was warned not to go there. And he then joined the YMCA and wanted to practice swimming. So his mother had warned him against it and kept fresh in his mind the details of each drowning in the river. So every time some mishap happened, his mother would tell him of the same so that the boy stays away from the river. But the YMCA pool was safe. It was only 2 or 3 feet deep at the shallow end, and while it was 9 feet at the other end, the drop was gradual. he got a pair of water wings and went to the pool. So that was his preparation to learn swimming. But Douglas says, I had an aversion to the water when I was in it, and he was very skinny. He didn't want to wear swimming suit. I had an aversion to the water when I was in it, says Douglas. Actually, he did not like to go into water. He was afraid. When did he start having this aversion and how? Let us know that. He then goes on to describe his fear of water. This started when I was 3 or 4 years old and father took me to the beach in California. He and I stood together in the surf. I hung on to him, yet the waves knocked me down and swept over me. I was buried in water. My breath was gone. I was frightened. Father laughed, but there was terror in my heart at the overpowering force of the waves. So this is the time when he became afraid of water. His father did not understand that the boy is afraid of water. This YMCA swimming pool revived unpleasant memories and stirred childhood fears. But in a little while he gathered confidence. He paddled with his new water wings, watching the other boys and trying to learn by aping them. He did his 2 or 3 times on different days. So he tried to go into water and swim, though he was not successful, but he was making an effort. And he was just beginning to feel at ease in the water when the misadventure happened. Now the word misadventure. What do you understand by the word misadventure over here? It was an unfortunate day. So misadventure can mean a mishap, misfortune, catastrophe, disaster or accident. These are all synonyms of this word. Okay, so you have been able to capture the meaning of misadventure from the context. Let us move on. Douglas says, I went to the pool when no one else was there. The place was quiet. I was timid about going in alone. Earlier he had been going in when the boys were there, but today he was alone and he was afraid to go into the pool. So he says, I sat on the side of the pool to wait for others. I had not been there long when in came a big bruiser. Now what is the meaning of this word? A person who is tough and aggressive and enjoys a fight or argument. So that means a big boy came, probably 18 years old. He looked very strong. He yelled, hi skinny, how would you like to be ducked? So ducked is when I drop you into the water. With these words, he picked Douglas up and tossed him into the deep end. That was 9 feet. I landed in a sitting position, swallowed water and went at once to the bottom. I hope, learners, you have opened page 26 of your textbook. Now this page is very important because here the author is describing what he felt, what he experienced. What a harrowing experience. So I am going to read it out for you and then we will discuss about you. I was frightened, but not yet frightened out of my wits. I was frightened, but not yet frightened out of my wits. He was frightened, that is all right, but he mustered courage. He was in his senses. He was thinking of a plan to save himself. On the way down, I planned when my feet hit the bottom, I would make a big jump, come to the surface, lie flat on it and paddle to the edge of the pool. And I think these are the instructions given by instructors to all the students who are learning how to swim, but one needs experience. So let us see what happens further. It seemed a long way down. Those 9 feet were more like 90, and before I touched bottom, my lungs were ready to burst. But when my face hit bottom, I summoned all my strength and made what I thought was a great spring upwards. I imagined I would bob to the surface like a cork. Bob to the surface like a cork. So, have you been able to get the meaning? A cork is made out of wood. It is light. If you put a cork in the water, it automatically floats. Okay, so he thought probably he will jump up and he will come up like a cork, but it is not so. Instead, he says, I came up slowly. I opened my eyes and saw nothing but water. Water that had a dirty yellow tinge to it. I grew panicky. I reached up as if to grab a rope and my hands clutched only at water. I was suffocating. I tried to yell, but no sound came out. Then my eyes and nose came out of the water, but not my mouth. I flailed at the surface of the water. Flail at the surface. That means he was trying to catch something, but nothing came. He swallowed some water and choked. I tried to bring up my legs, but they hung as dead weights, paralyzed and rigid. A great force was pulling me under. I screamed, but only the water heard me. I started on the long journey back to the bottom of the pool. So this was his first attempt to come out of the pool, but he failed. But he did not lose courage. He went down. Let us see what he says. I struck at the water as I went down, expending my strength as one in a nightmare fights an irresistible force. I had lost all my breath. My lungs ached. My head throbbed. I was getting dizzy, but I remembered the strategy. This is the strategy that every instructor tells to all the students who are learning how to swim. He was following that, but he was not able to achieve any success. He further says, I would spring from the bottom of the pool and come like a cork to the surface, which did not happen. I would lie flat on the water, strike out with my arms and thrash with my legs. Then I would get to the edge of the pool and be safe. I went down, down endlessly. I opened my eyes, nothing but water with a yellow glow, dark water that one could not see through. And then sheer, stark terror seized me, terror that knows no understanding, terror that knows no control, terror that no one can understand who has not experienced it. So what a harrowing experience. He was now terrified. All this while he was thinking of the strategy that was told to him, but the strategy did not work. He was not afraid earlier, but now he was totally terrified. I was shrieking underwater. I was paralyzed underwater, stiff, rigid with fear. Even the screams in my throat were frozen. Only my heart and the pounding in my head said that I was still alive. But he was losing consciousness, that means. And then in the midst of the terror came a touch of reason. Once again he reasoned out how to save himself. He further says, I must remember to jump when I hit the bottom. At last, I felt the tiles under me. My toes reached out as if to grab them. I jumped with everything I had. He was already losing strength and he did not know how to swim. So he gathered all his strength and once again tried to jump, but the jump made no difference. The water was still around me. I looked for ropes, ladders, water wings, nothing but water. A mass of yellow water held me. Stark yellow took an ever deeper hold on me, like a great charge of electricity. I shook and trembled with fright. Now he was frightened. My arms wouldn't move, my legs wouldn't move. I tried to call for help, to call for mother, nothing happened. You see, he called for his mother. It's a very natural instinct with all of us. Whenever something unknown happens to us, we immediately say, "Oh Ma." We remember our mother first of all, and he did the same. You see how beautifully he is explaining his experience, his fear, his efforts to come out of the water, his efforts to fight not only with the water but also with the fear that was engulfing him. Let's read what he says further. And then strangely there was light. I was coming out of the awful yellow water. At least my eyes were. My nose was almost out too. Then I started down a third time. I sucked for air but got water. The yellowish light was coming out, and then all effort ceased. All his efforts failed, and finally he gave up because there was no strength in his body. He didn't know how to come out of the pool. So he says that I relaxed, he let it go. Maybe it's not that he was starting relaxing consciously, maybe because he was becoming unconscious. Even my legs felt limp and a blackness swept over my brain. It wiped out fear. Naturally, if he is becoming unconscious, there is no fear. It wiped out terror. There was no more panic. It was quiet and peaceful. Nothing to be afraid of. This is nice, to be drowsy, to go to sleep, no need to jump, too tired to jump. It's nice to be carried gently, to float along in space, tender arms around me, tender arms like mother's. Now I must go to sleep. That was, he was getting unconscious and his body was sinking. I crossed to oblivion and the curtain of life fell. Curtain of life fell means he felt as if this is his end, that's it. Have you noticed how the author brings in sensory details like the color of the light, how he was impacted by breathlessness, and even the physical sensations in his body? So, if you have not noticed, please read this section very carefully. These details make the moment so gripping and add to the dramatic tone of the piece. The author then recounts the next thing that he remembered was that he was lying on his stomach. Someone has rescued him beside the pool vomiting. He has been rescued. The chap that threw him in was saying, "But I was only fooling around." See, it is so simple to say, "I was only fooling around." I wouldn't call it fooling around. What would you call it? It was a kind of bullying. It was a kind of ragging. Without asking a person, you throw that person into the pool. That is not done. Someone tells, "The kid nearly died. Let's carry him to the locker room." Several hours later, I walked home. I was weak and trembling. It took him many weeks to recover, a long while to recover from the incident. For many days, there was a haunting fear in his heart. The slightest exertion upset him, making him wobbly in the knees and sick to his stomach. But gradually, he recovered from his physical weakness, but he was still psychologically totally shaken. The fear of the water had set in. So, how many incidents? First, when he was a child, his father took him to California, where he was put under the water, and secondly, this experience in YMCA pool, where he nearly died. He had nearly died in this misadventure. Now, what is the misadventure that William Douglas talks about? Can you recollect the events? The misadventure was that when a strong boy, a big boy came and without asking him threw him into the water, and he could not come out of it because he did not know how to swim. So, what were the series of emotions and fears that Douglas experienced when he was thrown into the pool? You see, he experienced many emotions. There was terror, there was fear, and then at the same time there were positive feelings also. He reasoned it out. Okay, my feet will touch the end of the pool, I will jump up and I will reach the surface. He made a strategy, he reasoned out. Of course, he was not successful, but series of emotions were going on in his mind. The next is, what plans did he make to come to the surface? Yes, he makes many plans, that he will jump, he will come to the surface, he will float, and then he will reach to the end of the pool. But it did not happen. How did this experience affect him? As you all know, as we have understood, that this was not a good experience. He says, I was frightened, but not yet frightened out of my wits. Okay? What does this mean? He was frightened in the beginning, but he was not frightened out of his wits. Here means that he mustered courage to come out of the pool. Now, which qualities of the speaker are highlighted here and how? The qualities are that he thought of a strategy, he had self-control, he was brave, he was courageous. Of course, fear and terror finally engulfed him. Now, a few years later, it was the waters of the Cascades. What is a cascade? Cascade means a waterfall. Wading the Titan or bumping river or bathing in warm lake of the goat rocks, the terror that had seized him in the pool would come back. You see, he was so afraid of the water, he was afraid even under a waterfall. A waterfall may not be so dangerous. You are simply standing on the ground and the waterfall is coming from above. And warm lake, maybe the lake was shallow, but the moment he reached any water body, the fear would come back to him. He could not take it. He writes, it would take possession of me completely. My legs would become paralyzed. Icy horror would grab my heart. This handicap stayed with him as the years rolled by. The author also mentions various occasions when he went for fishing, for example, in canoes to main lakes fishing for landlocked salmon. What is a landlocked salmon? It is a variety of the Atlantic Ocean salmon, Salmo sala, confined to the freshwater lakes of New England and the adjacent areas of Canada, which is Brunswick. Fishing in New Hampshire, trout fishing on the Metolius in Oregon, fishing for salmon on the Columbia or at Bumpik Lake in the Cascades. Wherever he went, the haunting fear of the water followed me. This is what he says. So, with this, we have come to the end of this section of this lesson. I hope this is clear to you. Thank you so much for being with us. We will continue with this lesson in our next session. In the meantime, please read your text carefully, divide it into chunks so that you are ready for the Next.